Hi everyone, Elliot Jacobson here. Wow, it's been a long time since I've done a live stream, and I did a whole bunch of these about a year ago. A lot of them on the casino industry, talking about various, just getting questions or playing chess sort of live. I made a few videos over the last year on climate change. I admit I have learned a lot in the last year that makes me much better prepared to talk about the subject. It's really a long journey. And I guess I want to share some of that with you in these streams and possibly some new videos I'm going to be producing. At any rate, this is testing my software, the audio, the video, and seeing whether I can work with this software in real time. So let me just sort of share this with you. I am live streaming using what's called OBS Studio. That's a open source piece of software that is fairly robust as far as these streams go. I've used it many times before. I just bought this camera right here, so a Brio 4K live stream. I'm not going to be streaming at 4K. I don't know who does that. Oh, look at the colors that just happened. See, this is what I have to worry about. Gosh, how did that happen? That's really weird. I don't even know anymore. Let's see. Up. Did that bring it back? Good. So, all right. So this is a little idiosyncrasy of this camera. And I have this little microphone here. So I also want to just double check that my lips are in sync with the words that you are hearing. And then I just have a couple of other things that I can do here. So here is one of them. For example, I can bring up, as you are going to see, I think it's going to be right over, well, yes, it'll be over on this side of me. Here goes. There it is. So now we have a browser open, and this is where we can be talking about some things. So for example, we can go visit Twitter, and so this is my latest Twitter account, and we can look at these things. So I don't know, this is just kind of how I want it to look. I think this is the right look and feel for what we're doing. I don't know whether we'll get any questions or specific things that I'm going to talk about, but this is more or less a test stream. So let me just talk about my life right now. I mean, what else are we going to do, right? So what is life like for Mr. Elliot at this moment? Well, so right now I am, I guess the main thing I'm doing is volunteering for our local Planned Parenthood. So this has been kind of a journey. Let me bring up that webpage for you and show that to you. This is the organization right now I am working with. And what we do is people in the community donate books to us. We have a place where you can get these books, and it's a shed that's out back. Yeah, I guess they don't have a picture of it up right now, but so we get books donated, and then once a year we have this huge book sale. There's somewhere maybe 400,000 or 500,000 books get donated every year, and we probably bring in about $500,000 to the local Planned Parenthood chapters here in the Central Coast of California. That's Ventura, Santa Barbara, and SLO counties. So this is just something that I started. I was volunteering. Gosh, I've just gone through so many different attempts to volunteer in this community that have not worked out very well. And I was left with nothing to sort of do as a volunteer about a year ago. And so I went and I applied to volunteer here. And the first gig I got was as a so-called schlepper, which meant I moved boxes of books around and did certain routine cleanup tasks for them. And after a couple of months, they asked me whether I would like to help out with their Amazon store. So they have a store on Amazon. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but yeah, so they are on Amazon, and that is something that, you know, I was trained how to use a piece of software, and And then I would look at books and I would grade them for their quality and decide whether they were suitable for Amazon, whether there was enough value there. And I did that for a couple months. And then the annual book sale came in September, and I've just been with this organization as an active volunteer for about 6 months. And they came up to me and asked me whether I would want to be a co-chair of this. There are two other people who help sort of manage the whole thing, and they want a team of 3 people to sort of lead this, kind of for some democracy, but also so that no one of us gets overwhelmed by the workload. And I think that's a great way to proceed. So yeah, so now I'm a co-chair of this. So I've gone, it feels like that, what is that Broadway musical, How to Succeed in Business? I sort of went from, the mailroom to helping to run the whole thing in just a few months. So I'm going to be doing this for a couple of years. I think the gig is 3 years, and it has certainly been occupying a lot of my energy as a volunteer. And I feel really good about this. I think this organization, their mission, just to support women's health in all ways, and not just women, but health of individuals who seek their services, right? It's just can be anyone, no matter how they identify. So I'm honored to be part of this, and that is a huge thing. Another thing, just to sort of keep track of my life, let me just actually go back here and hang on a second. So look, I have some people in the chat. This is fabulous. I love it when people come and chat with me. So let me just read you their questions. And this really is always going to be an ask me anything. I mean, really, it's ask me anything, ask me anything, ask me anything. So here's a couple of these ask me anythings. What are you expecting the next 10 years to look like in terms of climate change? So that is a really frightening question to ask. So you are Mr. or Mrs. Username, which there was a better question with that. I mean, a better name associated with that very deep question. What am I personally expecting? Well, so I made my predictions for 2022, right? I wrote a whole essay about my predictions for 2022, which included 2 things that haven't happened. And one was the collapse of the stock market. It felt like it was going to happen over the summer, but then it stopped, right? And kind of has made some recovery. And I also expected a more a fascist takeover in the United States government than took place. So, it's one of these things, like some things are faster than expected, some are slower than expected. And it feels awkward to say exactly what am I expecting in 10 years. So the way I answer that question, and I guess it's a great lead in to my sort of whole philosophy about the world, the planet, based on my history in the casino industry, is that there are probabilities associated with events. And so what we can ask are, what are the probabilities of the world looking in a certain way by the year 2032? So what is the probability that we have a blue ocean event? I would put it about 50-50 by the year 2032. And I am not someone who thinks that the instant we have less than 1 million square kilometers of ocean, then the whole world is going to suddenly die. That seems an absurd point of view. I mean, it still gets really cold in the winter up in the Arctic, and it will still get really cold there even if the ocean is blue because there's no solar radiation, right? So we can't expect a superheating to happen instantaneously. But for those who wonder about something like a blue ocean event, I would say 50-50 in 10 years. What other things are 10 years? Well, the collapse of the Thwaites Glacier is probably a 10-year event, right? It's sort of the idea was that it should happen within 5 years, so we should certainly expect it within 10. We should expect the Amazon to have completely flipped within 10 years. So we should easily expect 1.5 C. I wouldn't say 2C is guaranteed within 10 years, but you know, some people like to base their predictions of temperatures on this 1750 baseline, whatever that means. And the IPCC made this huge error when they first started out, in that they chose 1750 as a baseline. Actually, what they did was they chose the 30-year window centered at 1750. If you read their, you know, the early IPCC report. So then they switched to 1850 to 1900, and that's been the default ever since. And there's a lot of logic behind that, because we have actual good records of temperatures, you know, using solid equipment from all around the world, starting sort of roughly 1850 to 1870 is when it all got going. So yeah, so I am an 1850 to 1900 person. So based on that as a baseline, I think 1.5 is easily going to happen within 10 years. And we're going to have, you know, catastrophic storms. I can't predict when or where. And I mean, what's going to happen within 10 years? The easiest way to answer that is for you to pick an event that you're worried about, and I will give you odds for that event, right? Because okay, again, casino guy, right? And just I've got to show you this. Hang on just a second. So watch the colors change with this camera again. Here's going to go. Watch this. Watch this. All right. So this is my book, right? This is my book on it. Look, 500 pages on how to beat casinos, right? So this is all about beating just about every game in the casino in as many different ways as you can. I mean, I have 160, 170 different chapters in here on individual ways to beat different games. You know, you've heard of blackjack card counting. That's one way to beat one game, right? So I'm talking 170 different ways to beat casino games. So this is what I am known for internationally. This is my fame right here. If you want to know what makes Elliot Jacobson a kind of a famous person internationally, that's it right there. It's this particular book, right? This book and the work that went into it. So if you're concerned about an event, ask me for the odds of that event. I'll set up a fake wager, right? I like these fake bets because that's and I like to win those bets. Here's the thing with me. I like to win those bets. So I know that people overestimate the risks ahead in many cases. People think, you know, we're going to go extinct by 2026, for example. I mean, just wildly overestimating the risk that lies ahead. So I like to take advantage of people's tendency to overestimate risk when I set the lines for my wager. So if you see me set a line, know that I'm trying to take your fake money, all right? So that is the easiest way to sort of get a sense for maybe what I really think the odds are, is to know that I'm trying to win these wagers. So hi, Jonathan from Auckland. That's great. I am so happy to have you folks stopping by. This is really great. All right, let's see what other questions. What kind of systems do you use to track the ever-increasing amount of doom? Oh, nice quality audio video. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Kelly, especially the comment about the AV. So again, just so that you know, I bought this critter right here. And then I have this little mic right here, and I have some studio lighting that I bought. So I'm glad that that's all working right now. So let me just see. So what do I use to track doom? Well, I'm kind of obsessive about it, I have to say. One of the things that happens every morning, I typically wake up between 3 and 5 a.m. My wife can't stand it, but you know, I'm up early. She is like amazed every single day when she asks me, when did you wake up? So what do I do at 3 a.m.? Well, the very first thing I do every day is, and this is going to sound crazy to you, but I have to show you this, all right? So hang on a second. I got to show you this website that I visit first thing every day. So I'm going to bring this up, and this will tell you what kind of a crazy person I am, that I'm even showing you this. So I look at this data right here. This is the first, well, I make myself a cup of coffee. I come to my computer and I open up this data. And what this data is the latest Arctic and Antarctic sea ice extent. And I copy and paste the values for this value right here into a spreadsheet. And every single day I look through the spreadsheet to see whether there's some anomalies or patterns or something interesting about where the data is going. So right now, what I've been tracking is the November sea ice, Arctic sea ice growth rate. And so for me, that's a very interesting little piece of data to track because, and it's what gives me confidence that a blue ocean event is not going to be instant doom because it's really cold up there right now, right? So we would expect things to, ice cover to be increasing. And I like to just keep track of this year's increase compared to others. And at the end of every month or the beginning of the month, you'll see I'll pick and choose a couple of the graphs that I've kept for the last month. And if something happens mid-month, I will put that up. The next thing I do every day is and this is my daily thing, is I play Wordle, right? So here's my Wordle for the day, right? So number 2 of the day is Wordle. And then number 3 thing I do is to figure out the day's story for the moment of doom. And that I usually do by going to Google and typing in climate change, and then I follow that with a word like doom. And I go to news, and I go to tools, and I click here to past 24 hours. And I start reading these articles. And so this is my morning ritual every single day, is to just go through articles on doom like this and see what I come up with. Now, quite often I won't find anything here, and so I might then have to go back and I'm going to learn this system yet, all right? So climate change doomism, it's not letting me somehow modify this at this moment, but I'll type in different things then. I'm going to just go out of that. So I will type in different things into Google: climate change doom, climate change methane, climate change Arctic, climate change COP27, or just climate change. And I will start reading and reading and reading until I find something that feels like it is not a totally boring, uninteresting story. So, and then I will post it. So for me, that is a way of being as up to date as I can. Now, if one of those stories along the way happens to mention something that I have a particular interest in, like methane, then what I will do is to click on the scientific article that references. And I will actually track down the paper, and if it's not behind a paywall, I'll read at least the abstract or what I can of the paper to try and learn a bit more than that. So on top of all that, I have a whole list of other websites I go to just, not every day, but I have them sort of on my desktop here. And what I could do is to sort of go through some of those very quickly for you, just to show you what those are. So let me go back here. And so I'm just going to go and show you. I go to this site and the hunger map site, which should come up very quickly. So here's hunger map. Lets me track sort of where the current worst case scenarios are playing out. Here is where I get information on floods, floodlist.com. Here is a map of, I'm not going to go there right now. Here is volume. This is sea ice volume that everybody always tells me I should be more concerned with volume than extent, and I disagree. Here is JAXA's site, and so I can check in here and actually see the data. And so I have a couple more. The goes image viewer, Lake Mead water levels. So I will go through a bunch of these websites and sort of see whether there's anything interesting at all among those. So that's kind of, you asked, how do I go about sort of searching for daily doom? That's kind of it. I mean, that's a lot, right? I mean, I'm definitely doing that. And then once in a while, people have blog articles. Another thing I do is I check in with Sam Mitchell. Sam runs Collapse Chronicles, and I don't listen to him every day, but sometimes he'll pull up an article that I'm especially interested in, and I love hearing him read. He has, just what a character, Collapse Chronicles. Be sure to subscribe to his channel, and sometimes Sandy Shullis. I don't know whether I said her name right or not. I'll check out her live stream. So that's a bit of everything. All right, so hopefully that answers. So what are my, Dwayne Dixon is asking, what are my expectations for changes in agriculture and stable food production? I think that is an excellent question. And, the hunger map is one of the things that I sort of look at when I consider questions, food supply issues. We live in America, and I look at the stores, the grocery stores, and McDonald's, and candy bars, and sodas, and all this crap that we have to get calories from. And it's hard to imagine that the United States or a first world country is suddenly going to starve. So what I kind of think in terms of hunger questions is that it'll spread out from third world countries. It's not going to suddenly strike, a first world country, because we're just too resource heavy, and in the way we acquire calories from the planet and take them and turn them, into food that we can consume. So, for me personally, I do have a stockpile. I have a large multi-pound bag of long grain brown rice. I have some, some protein bars and some other stockpiled foods. But here in California, this is actually not such a bad idea because we kind of live in an area that is prone to disasters here. Let me just see something. Yeah, so I don't like that I had this thing on, but look, you can see what I look at. So I want to go back over here. That's a little embarrassing. So I personally, do some stockpiling of food supplies. But I know that when it gets to the point that first world countries go hungry, that there are going to be much bigger issues than hunger, right? So, hunger drives conflict. Hunger drives, battles, wars over resources. So if there is first world hunger, there's going to be first world wars. And we already have Ukraine and Russia, and what the impact of that on wheat has done to the world. But, we have a lot of other crops, soy and corn and things like that are really struggling. And, as the climate changes, I was just talking to this climate scientist the other day who didn't seem to understand the long-term hunger problem. And the question is, you're a farmer. Let's put you in Kansas, right? Or Ukraine or France or Australia somewhere, Queensland. You're a farmer, right? And it's the start of the season, and you're like, what should I plant? Well, is it going to be hot and dry? Is it going to be hot and wet, cold and dry, cold and wet? And not just one of those extremes, but pick one of those four and make it way more than it's ever been before, right? Way hotter, way drier, right? Way colder, way wetter. And because we are getting these extremes that are making certain crops not be able to survive in what is suddenly the climate has altered for that crop from the time it was planted. there's going to be some more and more serious issues with shortages. And again, if you live in a first world country, it's not going to be a big deal for, other things will happen first before you start. But the hunger is going to quite definitely spread out. And so when we look at this hunger map, and let me just go back to that and show you that again. It really points out exactly what's going on. The Horn of Africa, they've had 5 straight years of drought, and La Nina, right, is continuing for the northern hemisphere winter. There's no question La Nina is going to happen again, going at least through December, January, February, which means another year of drought in the Horn of Africa. So the starvation there is it's mind-blowing how bad it is there, and in Somalia and other parts of sort of the central African region here. So this is the area to look for. And of course, we can see right here, Pakistan, right? Is that right? Have the horrible floods, and we can see just how serious things are right there. And then, Madagascar is having horrible issues, and here we are in Ukraine, right? So that's not Ukraine. Sometimes I'm so stupid. At any rate, so Syrian Arab Republic, right? And this is Afghanistan, it says right here. Elliot. All right, I think, where is Pakistan in here? So forgive my geographic ignorance there. I hope that I get a pass on that at this moment. But all right, so this is what I expect for hunger, that is going to sort of start in this region and expand. And all of India, who knows? So let's see. That was not my finest moment, but I think you will give me a pass. So let's go back. All right. Let's see. All right, so hi to Jamie Russell, Kelly Green, Dwayne Dixon, Jonathan Holman, Fat Boy, Liam Taylor says, I have about a 45-day pantry wrapped around your gut. All right. You don't want to count on that sort of thing to be what you are using for your storage, right? You don't want to count on that. And just so you know, I'm on a diet right now. Here's my daily diet, right? My wife, again, she can't stand this, but here's my daily diet. In the morning, I have oatmeal with fruit and nuts in it. For lunch, I've been having a hemp smoothie, hemp protein powder smoothie with banana, carrot juice, soy milk or almond milk. And for dinner, and then I'll have like half an avocado as a snack. And then for dinner, I've been having rice with tofu, and I'll cut up some fresh veggies and have that with it. So that's been my diet. Most serious dietary restriction for me right now is that I stopped drinking whiskey. I love whiskey. I drink a lot of whiskey when I can, but I don't even know if you can hear it or not, but my voice is a little bit hoarse, and that is this gastral and this reflux that I have. And, I actually damaged my esophagus, and the doc said 3 to 6 months to heal. And so recommended no acidic foods, and also that I don't drink whiskey, and no salsa, no tomatoes, so all that kind of stuff. So hopefully I'm going to start drinking again soon, and life will be a little bit better for me. So Pakistan next to India. Jonathan, I thought I was pointing to Pakistan. So thank you for that. So Julian Wright asked, let's say, what are your thoughts on the odds of potential tipping point regarding the release of methane in deep ocean permafrost? So That is a really great question as well. These questions are as good as I could have ever hoped for on this first stream I have ever done on this topic. So, what do I think about deep ocean methane? I think it's overblown as a threat. I think it is a threat, and eventually the clathrates are certainly going to be a major source. Right now, the carbon isotope studies say that very little methane is actually coming from those sources. I mean, it's not to say that it's non-existent, but it's just not a significant player right now in the non-anthropogenic methane sources. So, number two source of methane is termites, right, of non-anthropogenic methane. And the number one source of non-anthropogenic methane is wetland, anaerobic wetland decomposition. And when you have a La Nina, what you have is more rain, more equatorial rain. There's lots of wetlands, but more CO2, right? So the wetlands, the grasses are growing. Then you get rain, you get decomposition, you have methane release. So when you're talking about, the whole sort of human collection of methane, from cows and everything else, fracking, and then all of the stuff that we can't control, and that whole big pie right now, the clathrates are a very small piece. And there's sort of this alarmist mentality that's been put out about the clathrates. If humanity lasts long enough, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, if civilization hasn't collapsed, yeah, we're going to start seeing a lot more of that, I would expect. But in the near term, in the next decade or so, I don't see that being an issue. Much more significant issue when you're talking about methane are not the sources at all, right? But are the sinks, the way that methane is scrubbed out of the atmosphere. And you almost never see the top scientists discuss this issue. Once in a while, there's a little bit of that comes into, a dialogue. But anytime if you were to go search methane the way I do every day, climate change methane, you almost never see a mention of losing the sinks. So right now I have 6 different ways that the sinks for methane are being lost. And when you are being lost. So what that means in practice is that the time period that methane stays in the atmosphere is increasing. So if the half-life for methane is increasing, if it's staying in the atmosphere longer, then the same amount of methane being released, by humans and by termites and by wetlands is going to lead to an increase in methane globally because it's not getting scrubbed at the same rate. So a constant rate of emissions still leads to an increase, just like with CO2, right? CO2, we can decrease our emissions of CO2 and still have an increase in the global levels of CO2 because it's got this hugely long half-life. So as methane's half-life increases, we see more and more methane, regardless if we are decreasing the anthropogenic portion of that. My take on methane is that it is the biggest problem we have and that there's nothing we can do about it. One of the largest problems, as far as the sinks go, and I probably should do a whole show on this, is that when we look at the source, the wetland source, right? So right there, that methane is going to rise through the atmosphere. Well, that's over the equatorial region, right? Which is where we have the most water vapor and the most solar radiation. Well, water vapor meeting solar radiation is how we create a hydroxyl. And a hydroxyl, an OH star, is what eats that methane, right? They bounce into each other and the methane gets oxidized. So that's great if we have lots of hydroxyls around. Now, it turns out that these fires that are going on in Brazil and elsewhere, sort of the equatorial region, are creating lots of carbon monoxide. And that carbon monoxide, it turns out, preferentially reacts with the methane. I think it's with the hydroxyl. I think it's something like 300 times as active in that reaction with hydroxyl, the carbon monoxide, as methane is. So the more we burn stuff, right, the less hydroxyl is available to oxidize that methane. And so that turns out to be one of the largest problems we have. Did you see that light just go out over there? I have to put some new batteries in that. Hang on. Batteries, light. All right. Sorry about that. We're back again. Let's see. Next question. Pakistan, been very mild in Ontario. Yeah, I just read yesterday that, I mean, one of the surprising things is that people think that because of climate change and the planet heating, that we should have less snow, right? But look, the northern hemisphere still gets cold when there's not solar radiation. Now, there's so much more water vapor available because of the warming that's taken place so far that we're going to get more snow cover. And there's something like the largest record snow cover in history is at this very moment for this date is taking place right now in the northern hemisphere, over Siberia and over parts of Europe and northern Canada. So it's this interesting sort of issue with people think, well, hey, look at all this snow. Look how cold it is in America. We're, climate deniers. It's so cold in America. God, it's just crazy. All right, let's see. Jonathan Holman says, I'm wrong again, that the Horn of Africa is the right-hand side of Africa in the middle. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to have to get my geography straight. Jonathan says, agree that hunger will spread from the third world countries. Christopher Spavin says, try a low-carb diet. I don't know what you mean by low-carb. You mean I shouldn't have oatmeal? No, I have to have oatmeal and rice. Yeah. Let's see. So funny when the lights went on. Yeah, I like to say that it doesn't take a lot of cold to make a lot of snow, but it does take a lot of water. Yeah, exactly. Exactly the point, that the more water vapors in there. Now, 1 degree of warming is 7% more water vapor. So we've had 1.2 degrees about of warming, so 8.4% more vapor, water vapor available. Now that's not, spread out equally all over the planet. There's, certain areas that are going to have more than that and certain less. So this is where we get these torrential downpours, these floods. Australia has certainly seen that in the last year. I feel so embarrassed about my geographic errors. Thank you all for being compassionate with that. All right, let's see. Any other questions? By the way, there is one other website I do like to go to. Let me just see if I can't pull that up for you, because this is one of my favorites. And if you haven't ever checked it out, you really should. So here it is. I have to just go over to it. All right, so the Copernicus Atmospheric Monitoring Service, or CAMS, and one of the things that I will do here is go look at their methane. And let's look actually at surface methane. So this tells you sort of where, methane is being emitted, surface level detection. And, this whole European area has been kind of crazy here for a while now. But what we see, if we go just up a little ways in the atmosphere, are these areas, sort of these equatorial regions, right, where we have methane being released. And this is going to be, wetland sources right here. And I want you to keep this in mind. And now I'm going to show you the carbon monoxide. So we go over to the carbon monoxide. And again, we want to go up a little ways in the atmosphere because that's where these reactions are primarily taking place. So we see that the carbon monoxide, from fires primarily, is also taking place in the same region where this wetland methane is coming up. And what's interesting, over here, the carbon monoxide is in China, right? There's always China, China, China. So let's go back to the methane and see what China looks like for methane right now. So that's another problem, when you have a lot of methane in a first world country, and that's also producing a lot of carbon monoxide, that methane is not being scrubbed as quickly. All right, so you should visit the site for sure and just look through everything it has. I will oftentimes record these videos or screenshots from here. Another thing that I just learned recently, I read this paper, by the way, on nitrogen dioxide, and it just hadn't occurred to me before because nitrogen dioxide I think of as a greenhouse gas, but it turns out that we need if you think about this aerosol masking effect, which I think you know what that is, right? The aerosol masking are sulfates that are in the atmosphere, right? That are produced industrially and in the exhausts. Used to be more in the exhausts of certain shipping fuels primarily, where we'd have a lot of this, but recently the fuel's been cleaned out in about 2020. So we're not getting as many sulfates from shipping, but at any rate, so sulfates reflect incoming solar radiation, so they sort of block that radiation from coming in and hitting the planet, so we get this sort of dimming impact that the IPCC has said is somewhere between about 0.5 C and 0.9 C, and a lot of people like to sort of say, oh, no, it's this much larger number. I think 0.5 C is bad enough, so I'm going to be happy with that number. But one of the things I learned about nitrogen dioxide is that it is also useful in scrubbing methane. So during the COVID lockdown, we had a methane spike. Well, we've been having a spike for a while, but there was recently some research that was done that said about 5 parts per billion of the 2020 spike was due to having not as many airplanes in the sky with their exhaust producing nitrogen dioxide. So nitrogen dioxide somehow is, when we have more nitrogen dioxide, that is somehow, and I have to look at the chemistry of this, allowing more methane to get scrubbed out. So less nitrogen dioxide, less scrubbing of methane. And gosh, I wish I knew the direct chemical pathway of that. I wouldn't feel quite as ignorant at this moment. But what's interesting is that because it's also a greenhouse gas, efforts to reduce nitrogen dioxide, right, which is it's one of the 4 greenhouse gases, is something that is going to also be increasing methane, right? So if we reduce nitrogen dioxide by, cleaner fuels or whatever. So let me just show you that for a second. I want to show you this NOAA Global. So here we are. Let me go back here. So here's nitrogen dioxide over at the NOAA site, and we can see that when we well, he studied somewhere in this region right here that when there was a lot of flights grounded, that we had a spike in methane as a result. So the higher we get of N2O, paradoxically, the more that helps scrub methane. So in some sense, we want more of this greenhouse gas the same way we want more sulfates, right? So sort of a strange way that things have played out there. All right, I don't always get everything right, but let me just see. Um, Let me see, I like these questions. Selena Fee says, really appreciate your informative way of communicating our predicament. Thank you, Professor. So, okay, Liam says, his comment about the cold. It doesn't take a lot of cold to make snow, just a lot of moisture. Mark Krein asks, what's the climate casino over under for peak CO2 concentration and when do we reach it? I'm thinking, and I have this as a poll question. I might even, no, I can't put this because it's too long-term of a question. But there are sort of two things that can lead to peak CO2, right? One is the collapse of global industrial civilization. And the other is that we actually reach, net zero and it starts naturally falling out of the atmosphere. Housefather has stated, and I looked and looked for this tweet, but I couldn't find it. Housefather stated that if we were to be net zero today, and he loves to do this, like play these sort of impossible world scenarios. But if we were net zero today, then we would be at approximately 370 parts per million by the year 2100. And I had remembered that, so I actually sent him a tweet and double checked that with him. And he said, yes, that sounds about right. So CO2, people say, well, it'll last in the atmosphere for forever, right? Well, yes and no. I mean, there's really old CO2 up there, right? So it does naturally go out. It's not like every bit of CO2 that's ever gone into the atmosphere is going to stay there forever, right? So it does naturally fall out. And if we were to be net zero today, it would be around 370 by the year 2100. If you actually look at the modeling of things and you look at sort of the best SSP or the RCPs, I believe the best case scenario shows a peak CO2 somewhere in the range of 2050 to 2070. And that value is somewhere in the 450 parts per million. And so I kind of go with that on two different pathways to 450 as being our peak CO2. One is that we are heading, there is some improvements being made in CO2 emissions, but along the way, civilization is going to collapse, right? So you sort of put those two things together. So my over-under on CO2 is about 450 or so. And as far as when that happens, I mean, we can kind of forecast that. We are going up at about, right now we're probably going to go up 3 parts per million this year over last year. So we're at 420. So that's, 15, I'm going to say 15 to 20 years. So let's call it 2040. All right. So if you want to, my over under today at this moment, right? And I can change if I do some more research, but right at this moment, my over under is 450 parts per million in the year 2040. My lifespan, actuarial, is till the year 2044. So we'll see. Maybe I'll live long enough to see whether that plays out. I should actually write that one down so that I can post that. So I'm telling you right now, right here and now, 450 parts per million by the year 2040. All right, maybe we'll make a bet out of that. Well, Sultan Bev, evening from the UK back to you. The UK is having some fun times, aren't you? Wow. All right. So Kelly Green says, have you considered a key light more straight on my face? I have a key light up here. Let me try that. To flatten out my features. Does that help at all? Let me also shade that one a difference. So there you go. Let's see whether that helps or not. Yeah, I have a key light, so I just changed that. Yes. Yeah, so that's really a good question, Kelly. Also, to lock in the exposure, color, temperature, I think that's great. I just got this yesterday, this cam, so I don't know. I haven't looked at the settings. Um, all right, look at you. You are going to get blocked. How do I block? I remove this person. Sex find. All right, I guess I'm going to need moderators when I do this in any real world. So, I made kind of a prediction on Twitter about the UK collapsing by next summer. Um, I don't know what collapse looks like, but it's definitely more than a challenge. I can't imagine what it's like to actually live there. So, yeah, I'm not sure what I quite mean by collapse when I made that prediction. So we're gonna have to see. All right, let's see. Yeah, so Sultan Bev correctly, quotes my number of 3 parts per million this year to say, well, then in a decade we'd be at 450. But I do think we're going to make progress. Is the thing. I do think we are going to get more electrified vehicles. That there is going to be some solar and wind. That we're going to make progress in slowing the growth rate of CO2. So it might be 3 parts per million, and a lot of that has to do with just still coming out of the pandemic, that CO2 is sort of artificially low the last couple of years because people weren't doing as much traveling. I mean, travel is crazy now, right? So I think this is a unique year for CO2 growth. So my over under for this year is 424 parts per million, which is about well, it's exactly 3.01 parts per million growth over last year's high point, which was 420.99. So, we're going to probably get down to the 1.5, by the end of the decade. So, yeah, I'm still going to stick with that 20, 40, 450 parts per million. Mark Krein asks, are there any geoengineering technologies you think have any promise or might be scalable? Yeah, of course. I mean, there are, and I don't think that they'll ever come to pass just because governments won't agree to invest the huge resources needed to make those things happen. So, of course, the number one such is MIR, the Mirror Reflection Project. So essentially creating a lot of mirrors, right? Silicon is a very cheap and readily available material. We can create reflective surfaces. We can, you know, put huge amount of reflective material over large expanses of the ocean, and that would help a lot. Of course, people are always talking about injecting sulfates, having the air reconnaissance, where we have something like 700 military aircraft operating full-time, round the clock, 24/7, all year, in and out, injecting sulfates into the upper atmosphere over the Arctic. Sure, but that's not going to happen. So as far as scalable, I think the Mirror Reflection Project is the one I would go with on that. So, yeah. I think this has been great. Are there any other questions before I go? I think, I wasn't expecting to get this many people watching, and I really appreciate this. I appreciate you asking just great questions, start to finish, and being a little bit tolerant with me as I am completely unprepared to answer certain things at this time. I mean, one of the things about making videos or writing a post is you have time to sort of double check your answers and your resources. And, as a scientist, I hate to say things that are wrong, but sometimes you sort of feel like I'm going to say things anyway, just because it's important to add context, and then I'll check myself later. So please, always double check me. Always double check what I say. Always say, yeah, he could have made a mistake there. None of them are intentional. I'm not trying to exaggerate or get anything, intentionally mislead on any topics at all, but I get things wrong, right? And so if I do, you're more than welcome to correct me. And I take feedback very well. I take being wrong very easily, and I am always grateful for it. All right, so Bob says it's all about the economy, sad but true. This idea of endless growth, that we can grow at 2%, that we can grow. I mean, humans were on this planet for, in some sort of civilizational sense for at least 100,000 years, right? And in a modern civilization, probably 20,000 years, we get some sense that there were civilizations, there were some agriculture and cooking and that sort of thing going back a long time. So if we look at the number of generations, that would be, let's just call it 10,000 years, that is going to be 4,000 or 400 generations. Let's call it 400 generations. So we had 400 generations of humans on this planet, out of the that roughly lived with exactly the same life. They how they were born was going to be how they die, right? There isn't going to be a lot of change in their lives. It's not, they weren't going to be a lot richer when they were dead than when they were born. It's not like they were going to suddenly have a new phone or a new computer or a new car or a new television or, some new gadget or some new healthcare or some new spaceship or, some new CEO, right? The way they were born is the way they were going to die. There was no growth, right? There was not such a thing as the growth of civilization. And so you go along for, 400 generations, and then along comes the industrial age. Let's call it 1750 to the year 2000, so 250 years. So let's call it 10 generations, right? So we have 400 generations of just absolutely flat line. That's how civilization is. Nobody expected that suddenly they'd have, people are going to live another 30 years, that we're going to have these, everybody should own land and have a huge house and a car and furniture and, a stove and a refrigerator and a microwave and a microphone, right? Nobody expected this stuff to happen. And now we have it, right? And now that we have it, we assume that in the future, we should always have more, right? Our children should always have a better life than us. Everybody should always be able to have stuff, that we should, as the population explodes, every one of those people in this exploding population should be able to have all the stuff that all the other people in this exploding population have. And that's just crazy, right? That is the insanity of the last 10 generations of humans on this planet. So here we are, sort of at the culmination of this insanity, going through this together. And it's so apparent that this can't continue. It is so apparent on every level that, when we talk about that it's the economy, that's 100% the problem, that it's the economy, right? It's the economy. It's that we need it to grow. Why do we need it to grow? Because there are more people who need more stuff. So how do you give more people more stuff? You have to grow the economy. There's no way out. There is just no way out. Sultan Bev said, I did a critique on that idea of 700 military tankers doing 24/7 sulfate spraying. It ignores logistics and distance from airports. Yeah, well, Sultan Bev, if you have a website or a link, can you post it to your critique? I would think that I would like to have that in the chat. That sounds like something that would be interesting for other viewers to look at. Okay, so did I tell you I also walk a lot, right? So that's the other thing I do in my life, is I walk. And so my typical goal for a day is 10,000 steps, which is about 4.5 to 5 miles. So I have not done that walk yet today, and the day is getting warmer. So Sultan Bev says it's on Twitter somewhere. All right, so let us just hope that your Twitter handle then, Sultan Bev, is at Sultan Bev, and then people can look up your critique. There's a lot of that goes on. By the way, this book right here, yeah. So look at my face go red. This camera, I've got to figure out how to lock that. So this book right here sort of starts with an extreme heat wave killing million people and sulfate spraying. So I couldn't read this whole book. It was good for about that far, and then I was like, maybe I should read the rest of it. I couldn't. But at any rate, it starts out great, and it certainly is part of one of the plans that we could take in. Oh, okay. At Mark Bevis 3. All right, Sultan Bev. So that's what you mean by Sultan Bev. At Mark Bevis 3. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you placed that in there. So yes, everybody who wants to read about the 24/7 sulfate spraying that Mark Bevis did, you could find that if you search his Twitter at Mark Bevis 3. All right. By the way, maybe just one other thing. That light's going to go out again. These batteries don't last that long. I tried Mastodon, and people have wondered, like, what happened with me in Mastodon. So I have a long history with message boards. And a message board, is a little closed group of people who are all sort of interested in a common topic. And there are threads, and in those threads, people discuss the topic. And once in a while, people have conflicts, and there are moderators, and there are forum message board rules. And the end result is that these conflicts get deeper and deeper, and the person who runs the message board is just overwhelmed with conflict. And after a while, the person who owns the message board goes, I can't do this anymore. So the one message board that I know that the person who runs it, who absolutely has the right training to run it, is an ex-Army sergeant who is now a kindergarten teacher. And I just think that's who you have to be, right? So when I joined Project Mushroom over at Mastodon, it was yesterday, the first thing I encountered was the forum rules. And the rules just struck me as something that was going to invite conflict between people. Whether it does or not, I don't know. But it was that combination of the rules together with this sense that it was going to be a closed group, that they weren't going to do what's called being federated, so that you could connect with people outside of their little instance of Mastodon, that kind of scared me away from it. It does seem like it was going to be a message board. Essentially, it was going to be a message board with the rules for the message board, and they said there's going to be some moderators. So I'm just thinking, okay, Mastodon instance, some people join, there are rules for posting, there are a common interest, right? Social justice and climate change. And, it's because it's a little closed environment and it's not in communication with the larger group of people, it really does become a private message board. And I just have personal experiences with those. It's not to say this one won't be great for some people or that it won't be great in general, but for me, I don't want a message board, right? I want a much larger platform. And whether that's going to be YouTube, I don't know, or whether it's going to be, Twitter continues, or there's some other thing that comes to replace Twitter. I don't know. But for me, that was what happened with me and Project Mushroom on Mastodon. So in case you were wondering. All right, everybody. Wow. I think I have talked up a storm today. I think I have talked up a storm. So I have 3 sort of principles that I live by, and I just want to quickly share them with you before this light goes out. I can see it flickering, the battery starting to die. So just share them with you. Take them for what they are. They are be kind, be generous, and be of service. So I hope that you will think about which of those you could bring into your life today. So at any rate, Sally Jacobson, I'll see you later.